Okay, welcome, lower sixth, to another lesson of politics. This is the lesson for Thursday, the 23rd of April. Great. Okay. Doesn't look like we're going to be back at school for this one. Lockdown's going to be another 3 weeks, probably. So here we go. Now, the last lesson we spoke about whether Parliament was sovereign or not. I mean, we spoke about metaphorically. I did all the talking, but you know what I mean. Is Parliament sovereign? And I said that the next two lessons, what we do is we dedicate one of them to looking at arguments that Parliament was sovereign and one of them to arguments that Parliament wasn't. So this lesson is the one where we look at, is Parliament sovereign? Yes. Go away. It's not really voice commanded, but it's fun. Right, what we're going to do then is I'm going to try and outline the four arguments which suggest that the UK's Parliament is indeed sovereign. As usual, you're expected to stop and pause this when either requested or when you require to. Okay, first of all, we have this argument. Parliament is the ultimate legal authority in the UK. I would like you to pause now for, well, it shouldn't take you more than 2 minutes, to consider what other lawmaking bodies there are in the UK. Okay, obviously I'm not sure what you came up with, but you might have come up with the Scottish Parliament. You might have come up with the Welsh Assembly. You might have come up with the Northern Irish Assembly. You might have come up with the GLA. You might have come up with local governments. You might have come up with local goats. Could have done that. I saw maybe. Oh, it's gone. Or you might have come up with metro mayors or Magyars, possibly. And it's true that there are other legal authorities in the UK, but the key word that we've got here going on is ultimate, is the ultimate legal authority in the UK. When there's a conflict between something which they say should be done on a local level, so Reigate and Banstead Borough Council, and something which they say should be done on a national level, it is the Westminster Parliament that wins out on this. So it is the only authority in the UK that can override anything else, and therefore must surely be considered sovereign. There is, of course, one exception, one area where we can't say that the Westminster Parliament has ultimate legal authority. Pause now for as long as you need to consider what one body is able to overrule Parliament. Okay, hopefully you got the European Union. It is true that at present European Union's laws are superior to Parliament's laws. However, that will change. And the reason that is changing is because Parliament has decided to leave the European Union. So it's sort of weird one. I don't think, to do a diagram which would make this work in the short amount of time that the lines are available on screen for, because they go so quick. But if you've got the UK here, I'm going to try this, and you've got the EU here, it is the EU which is considered superior to the UK's sovereignty. But the only reason that it is like that is because it was the UK's sovereignty which took us into the EU in the first place. To be honest, I might as well not have bothered because that diagram was so terrible. But I think you get the general idea. Okay, right. Second up, we have, the next point is to do with the relationship between the Westminster Parliament and the Scottish Parliament, the Welsh Assembly, Northern Irish Assembly, GLA, and so on. Pause for a moment. What power does the Westminster Parliament ultimately have over these institutions? Okay, the answer, of course, is that, there you go, they can abolish them. Westminster can abolish any other lawmaking institution. As obviously the other exception is the European Union. We can't abolish the European Union. We can opt out of it. We can have it cease to apply to us, obviously. But if the Scottish Parliament begins to really get on Westminster government's nerves, it will go. If the Welsh Parliament gets on UK government's nerves, it will go. In Northern Ireland, not because it got on the Westminster government's nerves, but just because the power sharing agreement wasn't really working at that particular stage. For the last couple of years, the Northern Irish Parliament has been suspended, although it's talking about restarting it now. Thatcher abolished the GLA's predecessor, which was the GLC, in the 1980s, because she considered it to be too left-wing. Historians among you might also know that the Salisbury government of the 1890s actually instigated a London council, which was later abolished because it was considered too radical. So Parliament has the full right to abolish any other lawmaking institution, and that must mean that parliamentary law is sovereign, and therefore that Parliament itself is sovereign. Okay. The third section is to do with a different part of the British system. Now, the British system is divided into three groups, or sorry, three sections. I want you to just pause for a moment. Can you remember the three branches of government? Hopefully you did. And I'm not even going to attempt to write these words on the board. I'm just going to do the little initials. There's the legislative, there's the executive, and there's the judiciary. And they're all gone. Oh, symbolism. Oh, don't even want to begin to think about what that might mean. Look. Bye-bye. I'm having too much fun with this microphone. Right, okay, anyway, the point is that the judiciary are arguably able to challenge parliamentary sovereignty, but not really. The judiciary can only make recommendations to Parliament. They cannot force Parliament to change. So, for instance, when they decide against the government has really got it's got several options open to it. The most significant one, when the judges say, Parliament, you shouldn't do that, Parliament, the most sensible thing to do would be to step back. It would be to accept that the judiciary has said they can't do it, and therefore they can't do it. Pause for a moment. What cases can you think of in the very recent political past where Parliament's actions have had to be changed as a result of a judicial ruling? Hopefully you got one of the two Gina Miller cases, i.e. Parliament should not have been prorogued, was the most recent one, or if you go back, Parliament or the executive could not arbitrarily withdraw Britain from the European Union. It had to go through Parliament first. So that's one option. The judges can say, Parliament, we don't really think you should have done that, although you were legally allowed to. And the executive Parliament, they can respond by saying, okay, fine, we accept your judgment. Another alternative is they can amend the law. So when the judges say, for instance, the Human Rights Act comes into play here, the government can amend the Human Rights Act to mean that it doesn't come into play. Or thirdly, the government could simply ignore it. It wouldn't be very good press for the government to ignore what the judges say. Equally, it wouldn't be very good press for them to do anything, I suppose, except, do what they usually do, which is step back. But the bottom line is that judges don't have the power to strike laws from the statute book. They don't have the power to stop the executive or Parliament acting in a certain way. Obviously a judge has got a power to send an MP to prison if they've committed a crime, but what they're doing there is they're judging them as an individual. They're not saying, they're not passing judgment on politics. They're passing judgment on an individual. So Parliament will have recommendations made to it, but they are only recommendations. So the sort of key words, let's see if I can go lots of colours. We've got the ultimate legal authority, but recommendations, it's a very straight line, being made there, and it can abolish all the other institutions. Okay. Now, the one thing that we, of course, haven't mentioned very much so far The one area where power has definitely been exercised over the UK is the EU, but the final point to make, so the EU law will lose all validity within the UK at the end of the transitional phase. So January 2021, that's the plan at least, January 2021, European law ceases to apply. There is talk that there will be an Act of Parliament which incorporates European Union law into UK law, so that we're not operating in a vacuum, because it could be rather confusing otherwise. So just for example, obviously imperial measurements are known but not official, so feet and inches and pounds and ounces and all the other really sensible measurements like, firkins and hogsheads and so on. But equally, the legal way of measuring something is in meters and kilometers. So what's going to happen when we leave the European Union? Are people going to go to one shop and, you can get half a pound of butter and then walk to another shop and you can get 375 grams of butter? It's all going to be very confusing. So they're talking about maybe incorporating an act or having an act of parliament which incorporates European Union law into UK law, and then they can sort of drop the bits which they don't like. But the problem with that is that the government will then be considered to have way too much power. They refer to it as a power grab. They'd have taken huge amounts of legislative power and say, oh, no, we're going to legislate over this now. In reality, of course, that's what people voted for, wasn't it? But I think we're going slightly off topic. However, the European Union at present can defy the UK government, and in cases like Factor Tame did so, and the UK government had to go along with it. However, that is a temporary situation, and even if the UK wasn't leaving the European Union, it would be a temporary situation, because the UK could always leave at any given point. Additionally, if you want another argument, you could point out that on big issues such as the euro or the adoption of fully free movement like the Schengen Agreement, the UK Parliament has simply managed to negotiate opt-out clauses. So here we have four really key put-downs to rival institutions for the UK Parliament's title of most sovereign nation. No other institution in the UK has as much legal authority. Any other lawmaking institution in the UK can be abolished by the Parliament. The judiciary may only recommend, they may not instruct. And the European Union will have all say over British matters ended at the end of the transition period. So the one thing that I could turn this into a question. What do all four of those arguments have in common? Pause and think. There are multiple different answers. Okay, one of the things you might have come up with is that all of these are essentially saying that there is no alternative to parliamentary law because any institution that challenges Parliament can be ignored or removed. Okay, so that's what all of those other ones have in common. And that's true. That is true. There is no alternative to parliamentary law. If you're in court, you can't say, oh, yeah, I was following the law which me and my mates made up. Doesn't really work. You can't expect to be tried by anything other than the UK Parliament's law. That's what happens. You could argue at the moment for European law, but at best, you're going to get a stay of execution, as it were, because the situation in January 2021 will change that. So yes, the common factor running through all of these is simply that there is no alternative which has sufficient weight. However, if we're being pedantic, and I'm sure you all, like me, love to be pedantic, the issue is this word with Parliament. And I do all that and it just goes away. Because the problem with all these arguments is that they're a little bit imprecise. They don't appreciate that Parliament is not one homogeneous blob. Parliament is lots and lots and lots of different sections. You know this. It's got the committees, it's got the Lords, it's got the Commons, it's got the executive who are drawn from the legislative, it's got the backbench committees, it's got standing committees. Apparently there's going to be a coronavirus task force. It's got the civil service, it's got the special advisors. To suggest that as an institution, Parliament is sovereign is to ignore the fact that actually sovereignty is not equally distributed between all sections of Parliament. The reality is, okay, no other institution has sovereignty, or has as much sovereignty as the Westminster Parliament. But when you look within the Westminster Parliament, not all parts of it are equal in the amount of sovereignty they possess. So by way of an analogy, it's like saying that, a house keeps the rain off. Well, it does, but most of that responsibility is thanks to the roof and the walls. So the door handle that's on your kitchen door doesn't really have any significance in keeping the rain off, but it's part of the house, so I suppose technically you can include it in that. That's what I'm sort of trying to say here, is that just saying, oh no, Parliament's sovereign, is to ignore the fact that Parliament is actually broken down into lots of multiple different groups. What we're going to look at in our next lesson will be a discussion of the counter arguments to what we've seen today, and that will basically be saying it's not Parliament that's sovereign, it's different sections of Parliament that are sovereign. That's the plan, at any rate. Do let me know how this is going, and we will metaphorically speak next time. Bye-bye.